Thank you very much for being with us today. Thanks a lot. I think we're waiting also for Dr. Norton to join, but we will start, and he just joined. Wonderful.
Yeah. Good morning, or afternoon, or evening, or whatever time it is, wherever you are.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining today. As with the Global Oncothon, we started early in the morning. It's already 13 hours. We are live. You just saw also the opening address Princess Dina did in the morning, and then we had already a lot of speakers. Leo Messi joined us today, and Richard Gere and Alejandra joined us today, and the day continues. Number of professionals all over the world, and we are here now. And let me introduce our honorable guests today. I'll start from the ladies, of course. Miss Martha Raymond, the CEO of GI Cancer Alliance and the founder of Raymond Foundation. Welcome. Professor Larry Norton, legendary doctor and past president of ASCO and the senior VP of Memorial Sloan Kettering. Professor Clifford Hudis, the CEO and past president of ASCO, and Dr. Garo Armen, a dear mentor for me, and the chairman of Agenus and philanthropist and the chairman of Children of Armenia Foundation. Welcome to the Oncothon. Thank you so much for finding time in your busy schedule. And I'll open the floor for today we're going to speak about pediatric cancer and cancer in general and about the role of cancer research. I'll open the floor for the discussion. Maybe Dr. Norton.
I think Martha should start. I mean, please, also just an overview. I mean, she's been so important and instrumental in this movement toward helping young people with cancer throughout the world. Maybe Martha, you'd like to start.
Well, thank you so much, and it's such a pleasure to be here today. I would like to just start with that GI Cancers Alliance. We represent our community, our patients, especially the children that are diagnosed with any of the GI cancers. And so our view is really that patient experience and what we can learn not only from our pediatric patients, but also, as the parents and caregivers when they are looking to us to, help their children. So I'm happy to be here and bring that patient experience and advocate voice to the conversation. So with that, I will turn it back over. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dr. Norton? Because I passed the ball before, so I guess the ball got passed back to me. I mean, so now I have to kick it in the goal. I mean, this is an extremely important topic, obviously, and it's something that we're all very dedicated to in terms of making improvements in this particular situation. I think the important thing to recognize is what are the impediments to making progress in treating childhood cancer? What can we do to overcome those impediments? And what can we learn from the struggle against childhood cancer that can help adults with cancer as well? And I think these are the themes that I've been concerning myself with and with my colleagues for many decades at this point. Maybe just to start things off and just some topic headings. The advantage to treating childhood cancer is that actually we do remarkably well compared to what we do with adult cancers. One of the reasons that has been proposed for that is not only are children generally healthier, they don't have as many comorbidities as adults do because they haven't had enough time to ruin their health with things like smoking, for example, and obesity and other genetics somewhat simpler in that they had less time to develop. Some of these cases are arising from predisposing mutations that occur that the children have inherited from their parents, for example, or relatively simple mutations, and that is easier for us to target with existing therapies that address the simpler mutations. If cancer is just a disease of cell division, and we've got good drugs that kill cells in cell division, then those drugs are going to work better. And so we've seen, better response rates and cures with therapies that are anti-mitotic. But this has also, I think, led the way in terms of targeted therapeutics in adults and the idea of identifying specific mutations that can be targeted with drugs. More complicated problems because in adults, the cancer is more complex in terms of mutations and the other molecular changes that predispose to them that underlie the cancers. But it's led in an important direction. One of the impediments is the fact that all cancers in children, by definition, are rare diseases. And how do you mobilize all of our international forces for making progress against a disease that's rare? And I think that is something that we've tried to address, that we have to address, but it's still an impediment, I think, to progress. In that regard. Part of it is commercialization. When you have large markets, because you have many adults with the disease, that it's easier to mobilize the capital forces for the financial forces for actually tackling that problem. And part of it is just the number of patients available for clinical trials. When you have relatively rare diseases, you've got few patients for clinical trials. We see that changing. We hope that's changing. I think that our better understanding of cancer will allow that to change, because if we develop targeted therapy for a child, that same targeted therapy may work for adults with cancer. And of course, there's this enormous promise that I'd like Garo to really address, to immunotherapy, which I think is the real game changer, right, in contemporary cancer medicine, where the immune system is the immune system, whether you're young or you're an adult, probably better if you're young. And by actually looking at approaches that utilize the immune system, maybe it help children with cancer and adults with cancer. So the impediment may turn out to be an advantage in terms of making progress in general. Those are just a few of my introductory comments that I'd like to make in this regard, and turn the floor over to my colleagues.
Thank you, Larry. Should I express on Larry's comments? So let me address a few of the more fundamental issues that we face as an industry, as a field. And it's not with the usual platitudes, but with a sense of urgency and sometimes the uncomfortable truth. The truth sometimes is something that we try to get away from. Because when it comes to, as we all know, saving lives, particularly saving lives of children, we need to really get beyond being polite and being restrained about things. I've had some personal experiences. Some years ago, a friend of mine, his beautiful child, 3-year-old child, died of a brain tumor within a 9-month period. And we knew that there was nothing that could have been done for him other than some experimental treatments, which always requires taking risk. And because of bureaucracy, this was blocked. And this was at a major center, Cornell in New York. And this child could not access some of the more advanced and experimental treatments that could have offered a glimmer of hope. Now, if we fast forward, this is about 6 months ago, we had a request from a major cancer center, and I don't want to embarrass anybody, so I don't want to name it, in the Boston area, about 4 pediatric children, patients, ages 8 to 14, all diagnosed with metastatic colorectal cancer, which is almost unheard of, but it is happening in today's environment. And because of the strong advice of our regulatory consultants, these are ex-FDA operatives, we could not get our product to these patients that could have offered a glimmer of hope for them as well. And as Larry said, immunotherapy is really the most promising area right now. We've seen that develop in the last 10 years, but we've had limited reagents, and some of the reagents have been very helpful. Some of them are curative in specific cancers, but we need to do more than that. So if we look at these circumstances, let's be frank and bold. The FDA and EMA have built a framework that demands rigorous data for single-agent trials, one slow step at a time, and unfortunately ignoring the obvious fact that combination therapies often hold the key to success. And we've always been confronted with this over the years, but especially for complex cancers, as we all know, are harder to treat. It's an archaic concept that insists every new combination pass through endless phases before we even can treat a single child. Now, meanwhile, countries like China are pulling ahead by fast-tracking multi-agent protocols and real-time data analysis. They're showing the world that breakthroughs can happen quickly when you allow doctors, scientists, and biotech companies to respond dynamically to new evidence, where the risk of being left behind, not because we lack the science or the will to do things, but because we're singled by self-imposed and red tape impediments that do not allow us to make the kind of progress that needs to be made in a state of crisis. So I'm calling on the entire medical community, physicians, researchers, regulators, and industry leaders to serve the patient, not your comfort zones. We cannot let professional relationships or fear of stepping aside, if we think constantly of stepping us outside of established norms, that will prevent us from making bold, life-saving decisions, that will be a blockage for us. So, yes, of course, today we're here to raise critical funds. Money fuels research, we all know that. Powers clinical trials and expands access, but funding alone isn't enough. If we keep these funneling of dollars into a system that is paralyzed by regulators and outdated thinking, we're merely throwing resources into a black hole. We must also change our way of thinking so that every dollar we raise can be used to drive progress with speed and agility. I mean, these are critical. So in closing, let me remember those who have already been lost, like the 3-year-old boy, and his life ended before it really began. I mean, I knew this child. I was with him the night he died, and it was a tragedy. So let us keep our eyes on the children that are suffering today and need our help immediately. So today's fundraising, depending on where you are, as Larry said, is critical, that we raise the maximum amount of money, but also we make sure that those monies are used properly without the impediments that we face, unfortunately, in advancing programs today. So I'll pass it on back to you, Gevorg.
Thank you so much, Dr. Garo. I'll pass it now to Dr. Hudis about his comments on today's and about the great work ASCO has been doing.
Well, first of all, I want to thank you, congratulate Oncothon, and applaud our fellow panelists. I actually, not having planned this, I think it works out nicely that I'm following these remarks, because I think the pointed purpose today obviously is to raise funds, awareness, and drive progress. But I think the undercurrent, which Larry, Martha, and Garo alluded to individually, is collaboration, because nobody gets to the finish line alone. And in that regard, I think there is a critical and clear role that we play at the American Society of Clinical Oncology. I want to provide just a little bit of context and then get to some specifics. We're talking in qualitative terms here, but I think sometimes the numbers are truly staggering. Yes, pediatric oncology or pediatric cancers are rare diseases, but rare in this case means almost 500,000 children per year. The rareness derives from the fact that there are, I think, about 2.5 to 2.8 billion people on Earth under the age of 20 right now. And so 400,000 out of that group obviously represents a very tiny fraction. And finding them all and being able to learn from them all and make rapid progress in a scattered environment is, I think, a critical challenge. Before I get to how we address that challenge in part, I'll also highlight the fact that we have a gigantic disparity already, because as I think everybody on this call probably knows, children who are diagnosed in high-income environments generally face pretty high probability of a favorable outcome. I don't know if any of you would know this, but I happen to have a very close relative who walked downstairs at age 5, covered in ecchymoses, and was, of course, quickly diagnosed with acute leukemia. And that child is the mother of 3 and teaching school in a major American city now, 3 decades later. And I think about that story all the time because in my family outside of healthcare, there's kind of a shrug of the shoulders, like, of course she was cured of her leukemia, and of course she grew up to be a parent, and of course she's a productive member of society. But I don't think that that's an of course kind of an outcome. That's a miracle in the context of human history. And in recent decades, it's commonplace only in environments where the resources are there and have come together to deliver that kind of outcome. And our dream, of course, is that that's the universal or routine outcome everywhere around the world. So the counterpoint to that, of course, is that in low and low middle income countries, in fact, the cure rate can be as low as 10 to 30%, if that. And I want to emphasize that for just a second, because while the scientific breakthroughs and advances that derive from research are, of course, the critical fuel for all that, delivering those advances to everybody is a surmountable problem. It is something that can be done, doesn't require new research dollars just yet. It requires other kinds of resources. And I guess that brings me just for a moment to describe a little bit for everybody the collaborative and supportive role that organizations, plural, like ASCO can deliver. Of course, we're the American Society of Clinical Oncology, but in fact, now we're up to 38% of our members being from outside the U.S. That's 38% of over 50,000 members and 170 countries. So that already is a resource for reach. And what, of course, we and others do is leverage those resources to drive up quality of care. And I'll just highlight a couple of key areas to think about. The first is, of course, education. The second is research itself. And the third is quality of care. And in each of these, there are roles that I would ask everybody who's listening and participating to play with us. The first, of course, is meeting, attendance, and publication. This is communication of information. And as I think Larry may have said, but certainly many times, if not today, it's information that is, in fact, the currency of all of this. We get that out there, and that's the first requirement. The second issue, of course, is research. When we have the information in front of us, we start to quickly see what the gaps are and where we do need to invest precious dollars. And in that regard, one of the things that we do is target investigators for support who are focused on pediatric cancer problems around the world. And then the third thing, of course, is to issue standards, which are not narrowly rules for how you must treat patients, but rather aspirational goals that people can strive for when appropriate. But the critical thing is they define the resources that need to be present for optimal outcomes. And all of these are done in a collaborative way. The final thing, and Garo, I think you were alluding to this as clearly as anybody, is advocacy. And in that regard, unfortunately, advocacy is a long game. And, you know, your fortunes ebb and they flow. In some ways, I will just say right now, we are facing pretty steep challenges on the advocacy front, but we can look and remind ourselves of real victories. For example, over the last decade, support for STAR legislation, which drove pediatric specimen collection and study, as well as survivorship research, at least here in the U.S. This was a very specific advocacy outcome that we were proud to be able to support. So I guess my takeaway for everybody is, one, nobody's in this alone. Second, we need to be open-minded and partner and collaborate with each other in an ongoing way in order to make progress. And the third point I would just make is really step function improvements in outcome are possible with the information and knowledge we have today. We just get them out into the world with the matching necessary resources. And I, again, congratulate you and Oncothon for helping make that more possible than ever before.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the important remarks and for sharing with us your thoughts. I think, I'd like to pass also give the chance also to Marta to expand a little bit more about the work they are doing, because she was very short at the beginning. If you just like briefly could share what the GI Cancer Alliance is doing and the Raymond Foundation.
Sure. Thank you so much. And I just applaud all of my wonderful co-panelists for your remarks and all that you do day in and day out to help our patient community. And I couldn't agree more that collaboration is the key. And at the GI Cancers Alliance, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary in the advocacy space. And we're a global alliance of about 120 organizations representing all GI cancers. And fortunately, as we all know, pediatric cancer is rare, and of course we do the rare. We get calls daily from around the world, whether it's a liver cancer, colorectal, as was mentioned earlier, in adolescence, gastric. So while the numbers may be lagging that I think are being reported, there are substantial, patients out there that just need a glimmer of hope that, again, our panelists have mentioned. And I do think the other thing too is if you are able to, survive the initial diagnosis, sometimes the treatments, the side effects and the adverse effects linger. And I think that's another area that, down the road needs to be addressed because these patients continue to, live and hopefully live a very long life with side effects from the different treatments they receive. So I will end by saying that in any way, shape, or form, if we can collaborate, reach out, we are here. And you said we represent all GI cancers, and we just want to be a good partner and help our patients in any way we can, whether that's advocating for them or providing resources, education, helping, get the word out about clinical trials, etc. So I'll turn it back.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Marta. I'll just make a short question for every speaker on the panel. I mean, if one thing just you mentioned, which immediately can be achieved as a result of the Oncothon, what you would single out? Yes, just briefly. Dr. Norton?
I think you're doing this. Yeah, the most important thing to me is that you're doing this. The most important thing is that we formed an international community that's focused on this problem even for a short time, but we hope that it's going to energize people to keep moving forward together in a collaborative fashion, as Cliff has described. If you look at overarching themes of everything that we're saying, and we're representing a very broad segment, if you think here of the community that's concerned with children with cancer, our collaboration is clearly one of the themes that we're addressing. Patient centricity, it's another theme. In other words, you're looking at an individual patient. We've heard individual stories, and I have many. And when you think about an individual, you always have to think about what could help that individual and how can we create a structure in the world that could help that individual. To me, one of the really key things that we all have to work on, and we are working on, that we have to eliminate all impediments going forward, as Garo mentioned in this regard, is innovation. We need new ideas. We need to be able to apply those new ideas. We need to be able to test those new ideas. We need to be able to bring those new ideas to individual patients, in trials, sometimes off trials if it's appropriate, as long as it's carefully structured. But everything that we do should be measured by how it's going to affect individuals, how we can work collaboratively to accomplish the best goals for those individuals, and how we can support innovation so that we can actually make the new changes that can really make a difference together. And if we keep those central values in mind, then we're going to make progress. Of course, we need something to fuel that. And the fuel is always finances, raising money to be able to fuel the innovation, the collaboration, and the patient centricity is really critical. I think the most important thing about our meeting this morning is that we're doing it dedicated to keeping the engine going so that we can continue to make progress.
Thank you so much. Dr. Garo, I mean, before you start, I need to make a comment. And thank you for all what you have done for Armenia. Hundreds of thousands of kids and adults who benefited from whatever you have done in Armenia and globally. Thank you so much. And
Thank you very much.
for the whole team.
Thank you. I'll just briefly say, and thank you, Clifford and Martha and Larry, for your very insightful comments. I think we live in a period right now where we all realize that there's a crisis. And the crisis is that we've been doing similar things for the last 50 years to cure cancer, and we haven't really been able to do it in a fundamental way. Certainly, we've made progress, but cancer still remains largely, certainly solid tumors remain largely, and not cured disease. So in order for us to really move the needle in a meaningful way, we can't be doing the same thing over and over again. I think I would like to see OncoDaily proceeds, at least a portion of it, go into some young minds, their work, to elucidate on what will it take to basically reform the system fundamentally. And the reason I say young minds is because young minds are relatively unbiased. They had not been affected by many, many years of biases that sometimes restrict the way that we think. And so it'd be good to see what comes out of an unbiased minds, innovative unbiased minds, thinking about what else can we do beyond what we have been doing all of these years.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garo. By the way, the funds which will be raised today, everything will go to SIOP and will fund Young Investigator Awards, Career Development Awards, and Park Grants, which are intended for capacity building and low and middle income countries. Thank you very much. Dr. Hudis, and before you start again, I'd like to have this opportunity to thank ASCO for the great work, and personally, like I was Ideal Life and LDP recipient, and it made a huge change in my personal and professional life.
Thank you very much. Look, I think what we're hearing here underneath the surface of this is two themes. One is the critical importance of open-mindedness, creativity, and making, I think, investments that will only pay off in the medium and long term. Because like to Garo's point, yes, we start new investigators off, we give them the opportunity to innovate, but no matter what, physics being what it is, that will not yield advances tomorrow or the next week. That will yield advances in, at best, a few years or more, I think. And we need that critically. In fact, we're riding right now on the progress that was seeded decades in some cases ago. There's a flip side to that, which is the urgency of now. And it is, I think, beyond frustrating that we know the right thing to do and we can deliver better outcomes with currently known technology and currently available information, but we don't deliver it because of surmountable barriers. And I think we need a two-track approach, and some of our resources, just as you just described, should go into that. Programs like the ATOM Coalition, collaborations with other organizations to get alternative financing in place to make currently expensive therapies available in low-resource environments, and to deliver the resources that, let's just say, differently trained professionals need in order to deliver basics of high-quality care. And this is going to take, again, a little bit of time, but I do think that that's something that we can fix today. I'll give you an analogy from in a different world, but we use it all the time. Adult men in the United States with prostate cancer. There is about a 20% difference in their survival based solely on what centers they go to and what health systems they're in. And I'm highlighting that very different environment to make the point that that's something that's addressable just by structural change almost overnight if we were dedicated to doing it. And I think by parallel in low and middle income regions of the world, we could put in the resources to make a step change in pediatric cancer outcome. And I just can't help but get a little bit emotional about it with all of the rides on this. As you all know, changing the outcome of a child's cancer is of profound influence over decades and decades that follow. Garo tells a heartbreaking story of a 3-year-old who dies. And, that's decades and decades of life loss. So the impact on the world from what we're doing here can be as great as anything else in all of medicine.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hudis. Final note from Marta, if you have to add, and I'll close it.
Sure. And I agree with everything being said by my esteemed panelists. My comments today are in memory of a young lady. Her name was Jewel, and she passed from gastric cancer. She was a cheerleader, a beautiful young lady, just starting out in her life as an adolescent. And I think Jewel represents so many of the young children we've all spoken about. One thing I would say in closing is I think our collaboration, our patient-centered approach, and that for none of us to work in silos, because I think joining together and keeping that patient at the forefront will certainly drive forward all of our missions. So again, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much for our honorable guests, and thanks for having a time for this. Before I close, just very briefly, today in the morning, Princess Dina started a challenge, $10 challenge, Oncothon challenge, which is called. So she donated $10 and tagged her friends. This is one of the ways our auditorium is watching us. And if anyone wants to join Princess Dina's challenge, just donate $10 and tag 3 friends who will continue the chain. And in the morning, I made a calculation with ChatGPT. It takes from one person to get to 10 million, it takes only 13 levels to go there. And with $10, it can reach 10 million.
Consider it done, Gevorg.
Thank you so much.
Count me in. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Wonderful. Thanks a lot and have a wonderful day. Thank you very much for being with us.